good morning, and thanks everybody for coming today to our Women in Wellness event. My name is Mary, and I work with Big Connecticut, and we are so thrilled to be here at the RVNA and want to thank them for all their support, because if we didn't have their support, we wouldn't be doing this morning. So this whole program came about as a result of talking about it, and as we go into a new phase of the pandemic, there's just a lot of issues with women's health, not just women, but our families. And it seemed like a good idea to have a conversation about all that and to bring in experienced clinicians and entrepreneurs and people that are really making waves in this space and helping people move on from what we've just been through. So we're so happy to be here. And without further ado, I am going to introduce Teresa Santoro, who is the RVNA President and CEO, and thank you for allowing us to come and have this program this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome community business leaders. Welcome the Ridgefield pod of Big. We are delighted to have you here. And how nice is it to have in-person gatherings again? It's really given us a feeling of a return to some sense of normalcy. So it's great to be here live with you all. You are in for an amazing event this morning. I was just wowed at the agenda and the expert lineup of speakers. I think it's just going to be a fabulous day. And you know, it's very apropos that, that Ridgefield Big would host an event such as this at RVNA Health. Why? Well, an event to inspire and educate women toward optimal health is really rooted in RVNA Health's mission. It's what we do every single day. It's our business. So again, it's very apropos that you're here for such an important topic. You know, if we went around the room, if I went around the room and polled everyone and asked you, what do you think RVNA Health does? I am certain, it happens all the time, that we would just have several answers and different ideas of what happens at RVNA Health. And that's because we provide a variety of programs and services for the community to support optimal health. So, you know, it's very natural that we get all sorts of answers. So I'm going to give you, like, you know, the 2-minute abbreviated, very quick version, because, you know, out of respect for time here, of what RVNA Health does. And essentially, we provide health care in 3 distinct ways. So first, we provide health care to people of all ages in their private homes, birth to end of life. We do this through nurses, social workers, physical, occupational, speech therapists, aides in people's homes. We do this through home health, hospice, end-of-care services, caregiving for the elderly, and we do it through a program called Nurse Family Partnership, where we provide nurses who go out to homes and help vulnerable, soon-to-be moms, pregnant women up to 26 weeks in their pregnancy, and help them with the skills they're going to need very soon, mothering skills, baby skills, and everything that goes along with it. So that's what we do in someone's home. Secondly, we provide health care in the community, in a public health setting, such as administering COVID vaccines, flu and pneumonia vaccines, hosting our health fair, hosting blood pressure screenings, and lots of community education in various municipalities and various locations. Lastly, we provide health care under our very own roof here. For example, we have well child clinics. We provide free physical examinations for children birth to 18 with medical doctors and nurses provide all the immunizations, and that is a very popular in-demand program. We provide immunizations for foreign travel. Wherever you may be going, you need information on what vaccines you need and safety precautions for various places, both mild and exotic trips. We provide a full-service outpatient rehabilitation and wellness center in our lower level, and we provide nutritional education right here in our own teaching kitchen. And you'll hear from 2 of those leaders that represent those very specialty areas, Kate Campbell and Monica Marcello today. So that's a speaking session not to miss. So, you know, again, those are the 3 areas that we serve. That's the 3 areas where we provide health care. It's just some examples of what we do included in what we call our continuum of care, birth to end of life. On any given day, we have approximately 1,100 clients, 1,100 lives that we're responsible for across all of those service lines across 36 towns, from Greenwich right through Ridgefield and through places north. Right here in Ridgefield is our main building, and we also have a location in New Milford. So, in wrapping up here, it's a very meaningful, a very necessary healthcare organization that serves all of our neighbors and friends. And we are delighted to be hosting you here today. So thank you for coming. Please enjoy the day. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kate Fitzpatrick. And Kate is a member of BIG. She is a former leader of the Ridgefield Pod BIG. She is the founder of Fitzpatrick Consulting. And I do have to throw a plug in, Kate. Tomorrow morning we're having our annual spring breakfast, and Kate is our keynote speaker. So she is surely a friend of RV&A Health. So come on up, Kate. Thank you, everyone.
Christine's jumping in for a change.
Hi, I'm not Kate Fitzpatrick. You guys know who I am. I'm Christine Santori, and I just wanted to make sure that I drew attention to the fact that we have 4 exhibitors in the back, and I want to give them some props. This was pulled together by them, speed lightning, and it was mostly so that we can live stream our events and make this event available to many more women throughout the BIG community. I also spoke to a couple of women this morning that didn't realize that BIG is now international. So guys, yeah, this is a big deal for BIG. So yes, we have 4 exhibitors in the back. We have Nero, who's here. We have her books. She's at the table with the books, sorry. We have Grow Wellness at the next table with Kathleen. Over on the right side here, we have with Dr. Brittany, we have the modern vascular. Sorry with the names coming up. This is intimidating. I talk all the time and never have a problem. This makes a little problem. I'm pretending it's not here. So, and I have people in the back saying, yeah, she does talk all the time. And then last we have Kelly Moriarty, and she is at the last table here with all the beautiful savvy athleisure wear. But she has a lot more to talk about when you guys visit her booth, so please definitely do that when we take a break. And now back to our beautiful Kate.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Teresa. When Mary reached out a few months ago just to float this idea past me, I thought it was a fantastic idea. I grew up here in Ridgefield, and I'd always heard wonderful things about RV&A Health. I was on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors when Teresa was our executive director. I was smiling behind my mask as she was giving an intro because I feel like each different department she described, my family has directly benefited from. My family all received our COVID vaccines here. When my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer a few years ago, and when it came time to have hospice services come in, it was just the easiest email I think I've ever sent in the world to email Teresa and say, we need hospice. I'm not going to cry until tomorrow when I talk about that. And now my husband and I are both PT patients of Kate Campbell, so just ask me anything about RV&A Health. They have been a client of mine. I've served on the marketing committee, the spring breakfast committee, so obviously I adore this organization. I cannot say enough about what they do for my family personally and for this entire community. As Teresa said, 30-something towns throughout Connecticut, so this is way beyond Ridgefield, but they will just always have a very personal special place in my heart. I think that was really all I was going to say. I am honored to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, Nero Feliciano, who also has a very special place in my heart. She was my therapist 10 years ago, and she became a very, very good friend of mine. She honestly also is such a gift to our community. When she started a podcast, just happened to be March of 2020, I wrote her first press release, so I just sort of take credit for, for nothing that she's accomplished. But I read her book in about a week, and I do have to share a personal story. I've been having some shoulder issues. I had my first cortisone shot last week. It did not go well through no fault of Kate Campbell's. but I was having some pain and I could feel my first panic attack coming on, and through reading Noreau's book, I had just finished that day, and I have been an avid listener to her podcast every week. I heard her voice in my head talking about her breathing techniques and talking about breathing techniques that can help with anxiety. And I've, had anxiety over the years, and I walked into my husband's office, sat down on his couch, was in a lot of pain, but could hear Noreau's voice in my head just saying, your exhale needs to be longer than your inhale. And I swear it headed off an anxiety attack. So I am so grateful on so many levels for this wonderful woman who is a mom of 4. She's a Ridgefield resident. She comes from a family of physicians. She is married to a physician. I saw her mother picking up her daughter at soccer practice last night. And she has been, throughout this pandemic, has been one of the voices of reason in my life, in my family's life. She's a psychotherapist, podcast host, national media commentator, and expert on anxiety, brain science, and spirituality. This is her book. I highly recommend it. I almost brought my copy, but I didn't think it would be helpful to anyone because I had written all over it. I highly, highly recommend it. I have given it as gifts to several people already. She holds a master's degree in social work from Columbia University and is a columnist for Psychology Today. A first-generation Sri Lankan American. She lives with her family here in Ridgefield. So, Noreo, come on up. We're really excited.
I love you. I love you too. I love you too.
Okay, thank you so much for that intro. And the beautiful thing, I've been in this area for the past 17 years practicing. And I don't know if it's because I'm Sri Lankan and when we make friends, they become like family. The same thing happens with my patients, which I know was not what we were taught to do in graduate school. But it's very natural when you have patients like Kate. And I'm glad that that's what you heard in your head, because I've said a lot of things in therapy that you may not want to hear all the time. So I'm glad that that was helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that intro. I don't think you need to be an anxiety therapist to know that we have an issue with anxiety in our culture. I mean, just to take a poll right now, is anybody anxious today, this morning, trying to get here? Yeah. How about stressed this week? Anyone? It is so normal in our culture. We've just come to accept it as part of what we do and how we do it. And especially in high-achieving towns like this, Ridgefield, I've been practicing in Wilton. Don't get me started on Darien and Mesley, I think we may be a little bit healthier than there. But I love this town. It's been so supportive to me. I also know for as long as I live here as an anxiety specialist, I will always have a job. And I remember during the pandemic, I had all these clients come back, and I will always make room for my people no matter how busy it gets. And someone said to me when I was telling them this, they were like, you have amazing job security. And I was like, I guess this is not the type of job security you want with people getting more anxious. But I do think it is related to some of our cultural values. And that is why I wrote this book. This book, I'll tell you, my whole journey has had miracle after miracle. This book, I had thought about writing a book on happiness because that's what we do as therapists, we get people happier, hopefully, or at least more fulfilled in their life, content. But when I started to think about what happiness meant in our culture, something connected that our definition of happiness may actually be what is making us more anxious and depressed. And it's this idea that our happiness is rooted in acquisition and achievement. And what gets really tricky is because then our identity starts to get interwoven in that definition as well. We begin to think of ourselves as what we do and how well we do it, who we are, also begins to take on that definition. And then, of course, what we have and how much we have of it. And I think in towns like this especially, that resonates in that comparison game that we all can fall into so easily without even realizing it. So at that point, the definition of happiness I started to question. And when I say miracles, so during 2020, gratefully, and who would have thought this was a blessing, my husband, because he's an orthopedic surgeon and most of his surgeries are elective, they got shut down. No one was doing elective surgeries at that time, so he was home, which may or may not have been like the best thing for our family. But I had 4 kids at home homeschooling. And at that point, my youngest was in kindergarten. She couldn't read yet very proficiently. So can you imagine doing all your work on a screen? She needed a parent with her at the whole time. And as a therapist, we just fluidly transitioned to virtual sessions. I've done virtual sessions for years because I've had patients here who've moved across the country. And once you connect to a therapist, you don't really want to start over with someone else. So I've done that for years. And I just got busier than ever. And it was during that time, it was December 2020, where 2018, I had written a book proposal because I just felt like that was coming in my life. I talk about getting in touch with your own intuition and your voice of wisdom in this book. And for me, I'm a spiritual person, so I kind of knew that was coming. Did not expect to write it when I had 4 kids at home, but I had an acquisitions editor come to me who had seen me on some interview and just said, hey, are you thinking about writing any books? And at that time, it was probably the worst time in my life to take on something like this, but seeing what was happening in our world, I knew people needed it. And I knew they needed a different perspective on happiness versus contentment, actually being satisfied with who you are, what you have, and what you do, and recognizing that this whole thing, this life is a process. We're constantly learning. There are moments in our life that we can appreciate that can be incredibly satisfying if we're attuned to that. And part of that is getting out of what we call the hustle. Just looking around and seeing what everybody does, you're no stranger to the hustle. I know people in this room hustle. And for me, it is somewhat genetic, being South Asian. I have 2 parents who are immigrants. They came here from Sri Lanka. They're both physicians, but they had to hustle. And my mom, you saw my mom picking up my daughter. Yeah, she picked up my daughter. I had my sister, who's a pediatrician, pick up my other daughter because I was doing something at that time, another interview. It takes a village. And one thing I grew up seeing was my parents work hard. And my mom said to me, you know, you have backup. You have us here to support you. We didn't have that. We just had to make this work. And if not, we were going back. So hustling, and especially if you're South Asian, achievement, it's genetic. We grew up hustling, and I remember my mom, and they were always there for us, but pretty much they chose work and family, and that was it. So my mom had said to me once, actually my father said, when you grow up, pick a career where you don't have to depend on a man. Pick a career where you can support yourself. And like subliminally, they talk about being doctors all the time. That's why there's so many doctors in our culture. I remember when I had my kids, my mom like came over. The first toy she brought was like a Fisher-Price doctor set. She was like, being a doctor, it's so wonderful. You know, that is like a South Asian Jedi mind trick that we do to our kids. So, and it worked for me. I actually went all the way to UConn Medical School. I did my first year before I very successfully dropped out and changed careers. But it's worked for me. So at the same time, my mom said to me, you can do what you want, have your career, but also know that the kids stuff, if you're gonna have kids, which you are, because that's huge in our South Asian culture too, that's gonna fall on you. So go into it with that expectation. So here was the message that, okay, yeah, you can do it all, you can have it all, but I saw early on, like that comes at a cost. It comes at a really high cost. And now what we're seeing is that cost really has been our own mental health. So why do we hustle? I want to talk about that, but I do want to read this is probably my favorite part of the book. I titled this chapter Crazy, and as a therapist, we don't throw around that C word very lightly. But it really is, I think all of us at some point look at what we're doing, look at the pace that we're going at, and we're thinking, this is crazy. Like, how are we going to maintain this long term, and what is it doing to us? So this is what my hustle tends to look like, and I am assuming that many of you this may resonate with you as well. So, this is when I write. In today's world, there's pressure to be a good wife and mother. You've got to raise those kids well, meaning well-rounded and involved in everything, so they have a shot at a decent college. Sure, you're an educated woman, so you have your career, but maybe you need to start your own business or find a side hustle, because one job clearly is not enough. And besides, everyone's got a side hustle. You always manage to fit in your regular bar or Pilates, or better yet, Peloton workouts. Sure, those might have to be at 5:45 a.m., but you gotta do what you gotta do. You know your why, right? Your word for the year, your mantra. Oh, and put healthy, gluten-free, dairy-free, taste-free meals that your kids will eat on the table every night. In your free time, go out to coffee with your friends and women you don't know or really like for that matter, because mom friendships can make or break your kids' social life. Volunteer at your kids' school, especially on class party days, even if you have to call in sick to make it happen. Heck, be the class mom, because otherwise your kids will complain that you were never there. Always return texts and emails and DMs from your 4 social media platforms promptly, or else people will think you don't care and you will lose followers. Post about snow days, which always means sledding, hot chocolate, and freshly baked snowflake cookies. Spend forever looking for the photo where it looks like the kids actually did the decorating. Forget that they were in the kitchen only 5 minutes before your daughter kicked your son for touching her arm accidentally. From 4 to 8 p.m., drive back and forth to various activities, and oh yes, don't forget to reserve that last bit of gas in the tank. When you hit the bedroom at 11 p.m., your partner is waiting eagerly because it's been days. This is the hustle. Does any one person have the patience, stamina, and ability to do it all? We have been led to believe the more you hustle, the stronger, smarter, and more accomplished you are. We have to earn our worthiness, right? But don't forget, the more you hustle, the more exhausted, disconnected, and distracted you are too. So, can anyone relate to that? Yeah. So part of what I found in this definition of happiness that we are constantly inundated with commercialism, comparison through social media, and it really is this idea that if happiness is having everything you want, contentment is different. Contentment is actually wanting what you have. And we often miss what we have when we are caught in this hustle. What I write about in the book is the practices that have been researched through neuroscience, and I know that they're effective because I've used them for 17 years with my patients. I'm using them on myself. You know what's so interesting? I heard someone say once, we write the books that we need ourselves. I needed this book, and now having some distance from it, it has really changed my lens on how I see the world and how I define success. And I'm going to talk about that definition of success in a minute. But this definition of happiness in the acquisition and accolades and achievement, it leaves us constantly pursuing. And what we find and what we know from the research is these goalposts that we have, the goals that we have, they're great. And stepping into contentment doesn't mean you give up on your goals. It doesn't mean complacency. It just means that you're more cognizant in the journey to enjoy the journey, because we actually spend more time in the journey than we do with those goalposts. And what our research tells us is people who hit all those goal markers, they're actually not that much happier. That happiness lasts for a hot second. And I'll give you an example. Now that I wrote this book, the first question people ask me is, what's your next book? I'm like, can I just enjoy this moment for a moment? I wrote about the cost of this book. I wrote about it in the preface of this book, what happened during my marriage when I was writing this book. And I'm grateful to have a very supportive husband, but we have done the work to get there. Because when people say you can have it all, you can. My thought is you can have it all, but not all at the same time. Because as you're trying to do all of these things, and if you're really strong in one area, there's a cost to it. And oftentimes you're not the only one paying for it. The people around you pay for it as well. One of the things I read about in this book is the importance of being present. And I had a friend the other day stop me and say, Nero, you are the most present person I know. And I was like, are you kidding me? Really? That is the last thing my kids would say, my husband would say. I did a launch event at Ridgefield Playhouse, and I just talked for 45 minutes during that event. It was a really great moment in my life, that moment. And it was just a moment. It was just a moment. And then after that, I went back to the challenges of life. But my 15-year-old daughter said, Mama, it's amazing how much you can say when you finish a sentence. Because at home, I'm talking and I'll stop mid-sentence and I'll switch to something else. Because this is how our minds work, especially as women, especially because our roles just traverse such a range of other people's worlds in addition to ours. And we're in charge of holding all of it up. So, as I told Dr. Brittany, I wrote about this book. In this book, I keep going back to the practices. I'm a therapist, I have this information, but I'm certainly a work in progress. And that now has become my goal, to invest my time and energy in the things that I know at the end of my life I'm gonna look back on and know that mattered more. That time with my kids, which is fleeting, mattered more to me. Not that I'm underestimating the value of writing a book. I'm very grateful and proud of this. I do see this as a family accomplishment, extended family. The times my parents picked up my kids while I was able to work. It is a family accomplishment, but really, am I gonna think about that? When I'm looking at the entirety of my life? No. I'm gonna look at, did I spend time with people I love? Did I love them well? Was I present in those moments that really mattered? When I've been working with people at the end of their life, that is what they think about when they think about happiness. And we miss that definition in this hustle. Part of it is that there's a lot of pressure on us, and we internalize these expectations, as I wrote about in that passage. There are a lot of should statements. When I'm working with a client, they tend to say, well, my kids should be doing this at this time. I should be here in this career. I should have 20,000 followers in order to be successful. What I say in the book is we have to stop shoulding on ourselves, because we should a lot. We should a lot. And what we have to stop and ask ourselves is, what do we really want? What is going to make us feel fulfilled? What actually adds up to a meaningful life? Because if we don't stop and think about that, the world is going to hand us metrics to determine that. They're going to determine our worthiness. I said on Tuesday night at the Playhouse is I don't look at book sales, because I'm not going to subscribe to those metrics to decide what's the value of what I've created. I said if the book does well, I'm going to hear about it at some point. How I've begun to define success is, what are the stories that come out of it, like what Kate said. Who has it been helpful to? Has this made an impact on people's lives? And those are stories that I'm hearing now. Those to me are far more valuable metrics than how many books did I sell. Of course, we want those things, but we can't let other people determine what we feel like is truly valuable to us. I have no idea where I am in my talk, because I just started talking. I do want to talk about this idea of good stress. When I was writing the book and doing the other things that I've done, people have said, oh, you have a lot going on. But it's all good stress, isn't it? It's good stress. Let me just correct that. There's no such thing as good stress. Because when you are stressed, your body operates as if it's under attack. And there have been many different research studies. One book in particular by Dr. Gabor Mate, When the Body Says No, talks about the proliferation of very severe illnesses, cancer, autoimmune diseases, when people have been chronically under good stress for a long time. And my thought is, yes, there are going to be seasons of our life that are stressed, but where is our barometer? What do we want in terms of deciding what normal is? And when we step into these practices that I talk about, there are 8 postures I talk about that not only cultivate contentment. When I was doing the research, I saw that all of them resulted in better physical health outcomes as well, longevity. And this really blew me away, and especially after practicing in this field for so long, I was like, how is a gratitude journal resulting in better cardiac outcomes for people who've had heart failure? There's a very popular research study that says patients in heart failure who kept gratitude journals had lower rates of inflammation after 8 weeks. 8 weeks, that's it. And part of this is when we are stressed and we don't even know it, because like I just said, it's become so normal in our culture, our body produces an excess of cortisol and adrenaline. And this happens all the time. In the pandemic, when that fight or flight button was hit, every 2 days, every 2 hours, when we were looking at the news, we were trying to figure out how do we make this transition, we can get stuck in that fight or flight mode. And I talked about how at the end of writing this book and turning it in, I started getting debilitating panic attacks. Me as a therapist was treated anxiety for 17 years. And it was just that over the course of the 7 months that I was writing it, my body had stored so much adrenaline and hormone. And I always had something to channel it into, right? Adrenaline keeps us going until there was nothing else to put it in. So the day I turned in my book, and it's actually a very funny story that if you ever come hear me speak somewhere else, you'll hear. I started having debilitating panic attacks because all of a sudden my body said, stop, can't do it anymore. And it needed some place for all that adrenaline and cortisol to go. And I took that message loud and clear. Luckily, I just finished this book, so I also knew what to do about it. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a moment. But the research shows that when our body is in that fight or flight mode, the cortisol is high, and we have mechanisms in our body, one in particular, the HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which acts to bring down our levels of cortisol. Now, when cortisol is high, that axis will shut off because it also makes cortisol, so we don't want to make any more. But when that gets shut off, there's several very important immune functions in our body that get dysregulated. So on a short period of time, that is okay. But if we're chronically stressed, if there's chronic stress hormone in our body, over a long time, that's going to result in decreased immunity that has some pretty serious consequences. That's why things like practicing self-compassion, getting rid of our own internal resistance, talking to ourselves nicely. How many times do we have exactly the words that our friend needs to hear when they're going through a situation? But when it comes to us, we're so critical. Self-compassion results in longevity, longer lifespans, healthier lifespans. And not to mention all of these practices, when people ask me, is contentment complacency? Do we just settle? Do we give up on our goals? Absolutely not. We see when we can eliminate some level of stress in our lives, when we can change the narrative to be kinder to ourselves, we eliminate a lot of resistance, the things that keep us stuck in places that prevent us from moving towards our goals. When we eliminate that, we get to our goals faster. So it's not complacency. It's not talking about giving up on your goals. It's talking about doing it in a way that's not self-critical, that's a little bit more balanced, and in a way where we can stop and take note of the things in the process to getting there that actually are going to make us feel more fulfilled. What was interesting, I did have a thought that was interesting, but do you see why my daughter's saying my mind is like a ping pong ball? If it was that interesting, it'll come back to me in a minute. So that's my thought on good stress. And because, as I said there, in this hustle, we're tired, we're disconnected, we're exhausted. I write a lot about social media in this book because it has become a very easy form of entertainment. It also can be very validating if we're posting something and someone comments or likes and we feel like, oh, we have a connection here, even though how many of these friends that we have, are they really friends? Do we know them? And have we substituted this lesser form of connection for something more meaningful? Connection, in person, face-to-face connection, or genuine relationships, maybe it's not face-to-face, is really the lifeblood of contentment. We weren't meant to do this life alone. But comparison is something that tends to rob us of our purpose. It tends to rob us of our joy, our ability to feel content. And I wrote a little something on comparison in this book that I want to read you. And this is something that's stayed with me. When I was 16 years old, my cousin John said to me, the most important thing you can do is be the best Naroshni, my whole name is Naroshni, you can be. No one else can do that. I've spent 30 years thinking about those words. What is it that only I can do? Who is it that only I can be? Sometimes that's meant being the best wife I can be, which means being a different wife than my stay-at-home mom friend is. Sometimes it's being the best mom I can be, which is a different mom than my friend who loves crafting. Sometimes it's being the best therapist I can be, which is a different therapist than a friend who has been practicing for 30 years. It also means being the best me I can be by treating myself with kindness and love. And let me share with you my new definition of best. It's simply being the most present. I have found if I can be fully present in each of these situations, what my best becomes, it's very clear. And that again is something that I am constantly working towards. And we have to have grace for ourselves when we're not present, when we're not feeling our best. It's amazing too, when I hear my kids say, "You are the best mama we could have," and I think about all the ways I'm not. And yet, what matters to them is those moments that we're connected. What we know from the research, it takes about 15 minutes a day with a kid for them to feel valued, connected, and to build their self-esteem. It's a lot shorter than you would think. Times 4, I can't do that every day, but if I can at least get to 1 every day, then that is building that foundation they need to go out into the world and feel confident and assured that they can handle whatever it is that comes at them. We have certainly, my husband and I, changed our messaging around our kids, because what we know now is our kids are hustling too. We have created this world where they feel like they need to hustle, and their identity is rooted in achievement and acquisition as well. And it's kind of funny because my son, I'm South Asian, my husband is Puerto Rican, and my kids, I think because we grew up with my family nearby, they very much identify with our Asian culture. My son came home and he hates getting B's, and he's super hard on himself. And I tell him all the time, your best is whatever your best is that day. And a B is okay. And he always comes back to me, he said, "Mom, but we're Asians, we're not Bajans." And I'm like, "Where did you get this from?" I mean, it was funny, I laughed. But I'm like, go outside and kick a soccer ball, be a good human, and revisit your work later. We don't talk very much about getting into schools and colleges. It's amazing how early kids start saying, "This is gonna look good for college." 7th grade, I have a funny story about this that I hope the person I wrote about never sees it, but it's in this book, and it made an impact on me enough to write about it. One thing I have come to accept, and you'll see it I have some t-shirts and hats and things that go along with the messaging of the book, and more than anything else, they're just reminders to kind of keep what's important central. My blog for Psychology Today is called The Good Enough Life. And that term, good enough, can be a bit controversial. There's another writer who put out a book on contentment. There was no books on contentment until the week mine came out, and then there's 2, within 7 days. But she writes about good enough as not enough, as complacency. And the reason I kept that title for my blog on Psychology Today is because I look at it as 2 different statements. That there are things in our life that are both good and enough to give us satisfaction, but we often miss them. And part of that is because we tend to focus on the great and the perfect, those things we see on social media, that we miss what is both good and enough. And sometimes we have this standard of perfection that we've internalized that we don't even realize, and we actually don't care about if we think about it. I mean, even just the other day, I was looking at something I was working on at home, and I was automatically thinking, this could be better. I need to add this to it. I need to, put more time into it. And all of a sudden I stopped and I was like, wait, is this good enough? Is it good and is it enough? And I said, yes. And oh my goodness, the stress that alleviated, the time that it freed up to put into things that were more meaningful. So I strongly encourage that statement be a part of your vocabulary. Maybe not in everything, but certainly in things that are not really worth your time or the stress. So there's one more passage in my book that I wanted to read to you, and it really did give me a perspective when I was thinking about how fast life goes. It's going, I feel like it goes faster and faster every year. Does anyone else feel like that? It does. And it just brought me back to what was, for me, not for everyone, but for me, one of the most important things to hold on to. And actually, this child just called me. She's a freshman in high school. She's 15. When I was about to sit down, and she's like, "Mama, you didn't call me out of school. I'm here waiting to go to my doctor's appointment." And I was like, oh my gosh, you really can't have it all. Like, I can't be on top of everything. But finally, I have the grace And I'm big on apologizing to my kids so they learn that it's okay to make mistakes and you can apologize and we're human and we are gonna fall short. We're not always gonna be enough, but that's okay. That's okay. I am normalizing that concept in their lives as I've had to for me. And in this culture, if they don't get that messaging at home, they're not gonna get it anywhere else. So I'm just gonna read this to you as I end. On a brisk fall afternoon, I walked to our mailbox as usual. I'm sure I was focused on one thing, getting back to our house in time so I could get one more thing done before the kids came home. I didn't pay attention to the crunch of crispy leaves beneath my feet, the bits of saffron and scarlet scattered on the mowed grass, or the smoky smell of wood burning nearby. I actually just made up those details now because at the time I didn't notice any of it. I don't remember any of those lovely sights and sounds and smells from that moment because we only remember what we pay attention to. I do remember opening a letter that day, one that I don't think I will ever forget. It's gonna make me cry. And it's perimenopausal hormones. I swear I was never a crier until like 2 years ago. The letter welcomed our family and the class of 2025 to our local high school. Although we were nearly a year away from my oldest daughter attending high school, the district wanted us to be informed and ready. I felt a large lump form in my throat and the letters on the page became suddenly blurry. High school, how did we get here so soon? The year 2025 seems so far away. In December 2006, when we held our firstborn for the very first time, my mind flashed back to the swinging and rocking I did every night to get this colicky baby to sleep. That will make me stop crying because those years were painful. Those were the days of sore legs and sleepless nights. People told me that it would get better in 3 months, but I wasn't sure I'd last 3 weeks. Now here we were 14 years later in disbelief, not quite sure where the time went. I wish someone could have told me to think of raising kids in thirds. By the time they're 6-year-old, you were done with a third. By their middle school years, you've got 2/3 down with only 1 to go. That's it. Maybe it would have put things into perspective. Walking back into the house, I began to think through all the times I'd been busy or distracted while she and her siblings grew up right in front of me. Starting my own practice, packing and unpacking from several moods, managing the busyness of each new baby. Did I enjoy the time? Did I miss important things? Was I fully present? An unsettled feeling washed over me. I wasn't sure I remembered enough of those early years of her life, but one thing I did know for sure, I was not going to miss another minute of my last third. So I wrote this book so that no one would have to wait till the end of their life to realize what was really important. And the practices I talk about literally change the lens in how we see the world. They do that through the neural pathways in our brain. And these things, if I can do them, I know many people can because I'm busy. I don't have time. I needed to write about things that were not overwhelming like most self-help books, but that anyone could incorporate quickly. And I think that we've done that in this book, and I say we because my editor was instrumental in it. So that's basically why I'm here, what I wrote about, what I want for you. I don't want you to miss the things that are both good and enough to satisfy. And unless we really turn our lens towards it, we will. And that, at the end of your life, is what you're gonna look back on when you think about what really made your life meaningful. It's too late to start then, but we can certainly start now. We're gonna be in work in progress. But now, when I wake up and when I get caught in the hustle, I stop, I do my breathing. 60 seconds of the right breathing makes a difference. I pay attention to how my morning coffee tastes before I have to microwave it 5 times. I look at the world waking up, the blooms, that releases dopamine in our brain because it's a new pleasure that we're taking in. And that's enough to give me perspective again. And that's why I wrote this, because I want that for you too. So thank you for listening. Pleasure to be here. And what a wonderful group where you can support each other in this journey and hopefully remind each other of what is important. Thank you.
certainly releases some dopamine for me. So I'm sure we're all in a little bit of a better place now. I'm Brittany Howell. I think I know most of you. I'm a mom of 3. I'm also a Ridgefield resident. I'm a board certified vascular surgeon and building a practice here, and hopefully you can visit me in the back a little bit later. And I get to moderate this morning's panel. So I thought we would just start by letting each speaker introduce herself. I guess Neuro has. But if we could just start with you, Martha, if you could just tell everyone who you are and what your work in the world is.
I use this. Okay.
Is it on?
This sounds-
You might have to check. Nope.
Nope.
Let's turn this on. Oh, here. The red light should help me see. Try it.
Okay.
No?
No?
It looks like it's
Maybe
Wait,
try
It's
a little
on.
closer.
It's on.
There.
It's on.
There.
Okay. Okay. So I'm Marta Huicharon. I am studying right now. I went back to school and I am doing my master in social work. And right now, I am doing my internship in the Ridgefield Youth Service Bureau, where we do therapy and therapeutic service to kids and their families here in Ridgefield. There are services just for Ridgefield residents, and it open neuros talk resonated a lot of me because during the pandemic I decided to go back to school, and I decided to go back to learn a new way to. I had a certification as a coach, but I realized that if I wanted to help in a way I wanted to help, then I would have to go back to school. So now I'm in this hustle because I am a mom. I have 2 high schoolers, so I have home, internship, school, and kids. So, and I can do it. So, and in the way, and the most important is like helping the community. So I think right now that is my job in the world.
Hi everybody, my name is Monica Marcello and I'm a registered dietitian here at RVNA Health. I got my undergraduate at UConn as well as my master's degree. I'm a very loyal Husky. I was also an athlete at UConn as well. So I started my role at RVNA Health about a year ago, and I basically support all the various roles that we offer here at RVNA Health, as you heard Teresa mention earlier. And so that's sort of broken up into 3 different positions. I support our clinical community, I support our sort of nonprofit doing presentations or meeting with the community just to talk about, nutrition and dietary advice they otherwise would not have access to. And then we also have our own private practice here where we see clients. And I specifically specialize in a few different things. One is GI health, specifically IBS. I also see sports, and also see, of course, the elder senior community. I'm really happy to be here because, as I mentioned, I am a dietitian, but I am also a person who, experiences anxiety, and I had a really significant experience with anxiety my sophomore year in high school. And so when we talk about this panel, diet and mental health, it took me, honestly, 4 months ago to be like, wait, what if we combined these 2 things? And of course, the research was already there, but I had to look for it. And it really showed some amazing, promising stuff. So I'm really excited to share that with you all today.
Hi everybody, I'm Suzanne McCall. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I have 2 businesses. One is a strictly telehealth business where I work with professional women, helping them to resolve their traumas in order to be successful and happy and really in touch with who they are and what they want in life. And the other business I have is a group psychotherapy practice, which is based in East Haven, Connecticut. And since COVID, it's become a hybrid practice, telehealth and in person. And my focus is on trauma and limiting beliefs, and especially over the last couple of years, there's just been a major paradigm shift in terms of our beliefs about how to live our life, how to be happy, how to integrate our humanity into our work. And so I'm really excited to be here, and it's just already been so interesting, and looking forward to it. Thank you.
I think, yeah. Well, you know what, Suzanne, if you want to hang on to it, then we can just send it right back.
Okay.
We'll start with our first question. So this is a women in wellness event, and I know personally, as a physician, as a surgeon, oftentimes when I hear the word wellness, I actually get a little triggered because I'm not really sure where health ends and where wellness begins, and then especially on social media when those two terms get blurred together and they're used by different people with varying credentials, I get a little triggered. So seeing as we are at a Women in Wellness event, I would love to know from each of you ladies, what does wellness mean to you? And so Suzanne, you can start.
I'll get started with that one. Well, that's a really good question. So I am a mind, body, spirit person. I used to be a dancer, and so I'm very in touch with the body and being able to listen to your body and hear what it tells you, and that it has to be, in order to be healthy and well, all three aspects of your personhood have to be working well. So if I'm really happy but my body is not feeling good, then I don't feel completely well. And I think it's, as Nira was saying, it's a work in progress. It's a process. It's not perfection. And so that is what I think I strive for, and what I strive to help my clients to be able to create in their lives.
So I would define wellness specifically with the lens of food and nutrition, how one can intuitively listen and learn from their own body and fuel their body in a way that takes away the pressure from what Nero said, as you should eat, right? Like the gluten-free, dairy-free. By the way, there's not a lot of research supporting any of that nonsense, so talk to me about that later if you want. But I would really strongly recommend that, you know, you eat in a way that supports, yes, your physiological needs, but also in a way that supports your lifestyle. And so sometimes that may look like, you know, eating this beautiful meal that has fresh fruits and vegetables, for example, the way that I'm gonna, you know, one of the meals I'm gonna highlight here today. But maybe later that evening it looks like enjoying a milkshake from Chick-fil-A, because that's just what was available, and being okay with that and giving yourself that grace to be, you know, all different versions of yourself.
For me, wellness is a balance, and it's a balance internal and external. Internal because we need to be okay physical and mentally, and that's a balance. But you have also to be balanced externally, because we're not just human beings in a space. We interact, we have systems all around us, school, family, work. So wellness covers all of those areas. So for me, being well and being healthy, or having wellness, have a balance in all those areas of your life.
I just want to say thank you for saying that about Chick-fil-A. Just eliminate a lot of guilt for my kids. But I would say very similar. I feel like we're our own very unique trinities, mind, body, spirit, and one affects the other. We're all integrated, like you said. And for me, wellness means making sure that I have time for each of those areas. And that might look different, the amount of time that I can spend in each on a weekly basis, but always being cognizant to go back to that and taking care and nourishing each part of that.
Awesome. Nora, you can hang on to it. We'll take your next. So like Kate, I'm also a faithful listener of Nora's podcast. If you haven't listened to it, just head into your favorite podcast player and download it. It's wonderful. So I was actually listening earlier this week, and I heard Nora quote Glennon Doyle, and this is the quote: Adulthood is saying, after this week, things will slow down over and over again until you die. So sweet. If you don't know Glennon Doyle also,
That's
that's
amazing.
a good read, yes.
Yeah.
So I want to ask Neuro, why is rest important, and what are some tactics that can help us slow down or even stop and rest?
Oh, that's a good question. And actually, I saved this meme on my phone about adulting too that I have to read to you. Adulting is basically stacking things in piles and then moving them out of the way over and over until you realize that you no longer needed the things you stacked up. I felt so seen in that. Because I thought this was like my secret, but apparently not. Why do we need to rest and slow down?
Yeah, and how, that how is,
It's hard.
yeah.
I think for me, as I mentioned that I started to have panic attacks once I finished this book. And those are really the first panic attacks in my adult life. And it was kind of a perfect storm of changes hormonally, but also stress at 46 years old. These are some of the most stressful times of our lives, between caring for aging parents, even though mine seem to still be caring for me, and teenagers, and being at a certain point in your career where you're managing a lot. So that in and of itself, that dysregulation of my body told me that I had to stop and slow down. And I didn't want that. I know, because I've treated this for years, that could be a consistent if I didn't make some drastic changes. And one of those things was sleep. I have always been like a 5 to 7 nighter, and mainly closer to 5 to 6 throughout my life. And I started asking this question, I can do that. But do I want to do that? Should I do that? And if I can't get the amount of sleep that humans need to function, are those goals realistic? Why am I holding on to them so much? So sleep is incredibly important. I think, again, being aware of what happens when you sleep is compelling to make more time for it. One thing I came across in the research is that our body needs sleep for restorative functions such as memories. If we want to have memories later down in our life, we have to sleep now. That and the production of growth hormone during the hours of 10:30 and 1:30 at night. And without that growth hormone being produced, and I know many nights, I used to go to bed past 1:30. For kids, it's super important because that's when they grow. But for us, it determines the longevity of our cells. Literally, longevity can be dependent on that time that we're sleeping, especially during those areas. It affects metabolism, it affects cortisol production, because when we're not sleeping during that time, our cortisol increases as well. So seeing it in the research was very compelling to me to say, okay, I want to function like a present, content human being, and sleep is a big part of it. And a lot of that means kind of setting the parameters around how late I'm going to be working, when do I shut things down, what am I doing just to get my mind ready for sleep beforehand. It's a hard thing to, especially when you function without it for a long time, it's a hard thing to incorporate. But I think at the end of it, you have to say, well, how is my body doing? Am I enjoying my life when I'm not sleeping? Am I even productive, for that matter? Am I offloading that frustration onto people around me? Just am I sacrificing them for this productivity? So those things were helpful in making me try and sleep more.
I think that's really helpful. That's helpful for me. That's something that I'm certainly continuing to work on. And I think, especially in an achievement-focused career, community, we really can treat lack of sleep like a badge of honor. I know when I was training, coming in the next morning to relieve that on-call team, they would say, I didn't sleep at all, and it was like they got an additional gold sticker for having been awake for 24, 36, 48 hours. So yeah, really working against that. So it's very helpful for me too. Okay, Martha. So not only have we lived through an actual pandemic, but our kids have. How can we support our kids who have been more isolated, more sedentary, and more overwhelmed than any time in recent history?
Okay, I will say, and I will think of 3 different factors. The 3 of them equally important, and the 3 of them very interrelated, one from the other. The first one is be present. You don't have to be present all the hours of the day, but be present when they need it. Be present to know who are their friends, what are they doing inside and outside of school. If they are old enough for social media, follow them. What are they talking about? And be there when they need to talk. It doesn't matter if they're elementary or high schoolers. For them, every conversation is a big conversation. So be there, and you will be surprised how if you do it, even though you have to breathe and say, okay, I will return to my thing in a couple of minutes. How you are going to be on their lists of the people to share their things. I am very fortunate that my high schooler comes to me and say, this is what I went through this day. She doesn't always hear from me what she wants to hear, but I'm in that list, and that is very important for me. The second thing, the second factor I would say is make them uncomfortable. We have all been through a pandemic, and our first push as mothers is to cuddle them, to protect them, and that is not helping them. So make them uncomfortable, bring them out of the comfort zone, make them do chores, wash dishes, rake leaves, pull out weeds, shovel snow in winter, age appropriate, of course, but at every age, they can do something around the house. And that will help them not only to foster resilience, but also to connect with their first community, that is family. So that will bring them out of screen time, and that will bring them to connect to the family. And the third thing I would say is, I have been thinking about that all day, and now I'm hearing it. Be vigilant of the family as a system, because I like to think as a family as a mobile. We have all the mobile things that are in a mobile from the ceiling in balance. And when one comes and touches one element, the whole systems move. And when the family as a system has a stressor or has a crisis, all the elements of the family moves. So sometimes the stressors are not on the kids, are on us. We have gone through a pandemic. We as individuals and as couples have gone through a pandemic. And sometimes we reflect that on the kids. And the kids is having a bad behavior at school, or it's fighting with the friends. But the root is not there. It's the system. So pay attention of what is going on the system and reach out for help if they need.
Monica, how have you seen stress affect your clients' eating habits? For example, the timing of eating and the different food choices, and how can we as women bring more awareness to how and why we're eating?
Absolutely. So this is not going to come as a surprise, and I don't even need any, specific numbers or research to support me when I say that many people changed their eating and food habits over the pandemic. I mean, it's only natural that when we were waking up at 7 and going to work and we had our work lunch, we had a routine that worked for us. And of course, when that stopped, our eating and nutrition changed along with it. So I've seen a lot of people, and I do encourage you to take a moment as I'm speaking and sort of think about what changed when you all went through this pandemic. What about your nutritional and self-care behaviors changed? So for me, as a dietitian, of course, I saw a lot of things get worse. And by get worse, I mean that people started over-consuming foods that they did not intuitively feel they need. They lost touch with when do I feel hungry and when do I feel full. They lost touch with, really connecting back to your roots, eating fresh, seasonal fruits and vegetables. And what this did, and what it's continuing to doing, is as we fuel those sort of short-term, more impulsive urges, cravings, we're also fueling the bigger picture as well. And there's a lot of really interesting research that I want to share with you about how our diet can actually be a cause of mental illness. So I want to just share 2 studies for a moment. So there was the SMILES trial that took place at Deakin University Food and Mood Center in Australia. And it took people with depressive symptoms, and they put them into 2 groups. And one of the groups was a dietary modification group, and the other was a control group, and that was just like a social support. And they found that there was significant reduction in people who changed their diet to eating more of like a Mediterranean diet. I'm happy to, I will explain that in a bit. But they found that people who ate more fresh fruits and vegetables, legumes and beans daily, extra virgin olive oil, had 30% reduction in their depressive symptoms, and 36% of the subjects actually received remission from depression on changing diet alone. And I think that that's really powerful because for 2 ways. So one, it says that, there's this continuum of poor health, and wellness. And with what you're eating, you're fueling it one way or the other. And that was the first study that really highlighted the role that there is this causal relationship between what we're eating and how it affects our mental health. So I encourage people to not just think, maybe in that moment, so okay, you have that craving and then you feel satisfied, but then you kind of feel like crap. There is a bigger picture perspective. And that is something that I try to encourage my clients as well, because not only when you eat, thankfully, the way to eat for mental health is not that much different, really, than the way to eat for health in general. Thank God. Can you imagine if it was like 2 totally different things? That'd be a nightmare. No, so you're also, fueling your body for health and wellness and decreased inflammation and promoting quality of life when you're eating for your mental health. So I really just try to bring awareness to this bigger picture. And sometimes, if I do work with a client who comes in, and I actually just had one the other day, comes in and says, I've gained quite a bit of weight since the pandemic, and I feel really lethargic and kind of depressed, but my diabetes has really gotten out of control. Now, as the practitioner, I don't, I can't address all 5 different things at once, but I'm certainly taking into consideration when I'm talking about their diabetes and weight gain, how intuitively they can also be being more aware of how to eat and fuel themselves to at least decrease or work with, your intuitive nature to decrease the risk of depression or other mental health and anxiety symptoms.
Very, very powerful. Okay, for you, Suzanne. The COVID pandemic, followed by the Great Resignation, have brought a renewed focus to the idea of work-life balance. What does a work-life balance mean to you, and how can we achieve it?
Well, it's interesting that this was my question, because this is something, of course, that I have, it's like kind of something I've been working on for a long time. One time I have 2 children who are not children anymore, 27 and 24. And one time before COVID, I was complaining about my schedule to my daughter. And she said to me, gee, Mom, you should talk to your boss about that. And I'm self-employed. So from the words of the mouth of babes, I was overworking and I was doing it to myself, right? Does anyone relate to that? Yeah, raise your hand. How many people here are entrepreneurs? It's even harder, I think, when you're an entrepreneur, or when you're a mother and you're working full-time. That's really hard. So before the pandemic, for a while, I was working full-time and I had a private practice, and I also worked in a group practice. I was exhausted, and eventually I had to leave my day job because it was killing me, really. It was just too many hours. So then I started working all on my own private practice, and having a moment of like, okay, what's the point of this story? And what happened eventually was I started working more and more and more. Right? The same thing started happening again. So, and my friends who were also psychotherapists were always saying, how many hours are you working a week? And I was like, well, I guess I see about 35 clients a week, and I'm also running a group psychotherapy practice at that point. And they kept saying, how do you do that? How can you do that? They're saying 25 is my sweet spot. It's kind of like a common thing I hear, and I get resentful. But eventually what happened was when the pandemic happened, of course everyone knows what happened, right? Everything stops. I had to shift gears and start telehealth completely. But I started to have more time for myself. I started to go for walks every day. I mean, you had to, right? You had to get out of the house. And I started to be able to go into the kitchen and make something mostly healthy to eat as opposed to like getting takeout. And I started to realize the importance of that work-life balance again and how great it felt. I had also developed back problems from sitting all the time and not exercising enough. So I started, and I think this happened to everybody, and I think that's what the Great Resignation is about. We all decided we were working too hard. And so now I'm much more of a component of the work-life balance. And even that work should feel like you're bringing yourself into it. You're not leaving yourself at home. You know what I mean by that? Like, I go to work, I do my thing, but my personal life, I take care of that after work, right? Now, I believe in the hybrid method of work, basically. You bring yourself to work. You bring your needs to work. And even the rest of the world, the corporations, everybody's doing that, right? It's like mental health at work. Hello. We were always humans going to work, but we didn't really want, and even today, look at how many people who are speaking are talking about their mental health as we're talking about being professionals and living in our life. So I love this. I think it's the new paradigm, and I think the thing to work on is really how to have that time where you're not working at all. Because now when I work, I'm happy, I love what I do, and if I'm not loving what I do, I start to say, what can I do differently? What needs to happen? I'm really paying attention to that, and that's what I suggest for everybody. Don't just stay in a job because, and I left a pension when I left my day job, and sometimes I look back on that and say, oh, should I have done that? But I don't regret it because I'm bringing myself into my everyday life. And when I look back and when I'm 80 years old, I don't want to feel like I, spent all my time working and not enjoying my life. So we have our belief system, right, about what's okay and what's not. I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but there will be times when I have a couple hours and I go for a walk on the beach, and it's the middle of the day, in the middle of the work week, and I feel like, am I working hard enough? Is this okay? Or, should I be going back and rushing back and working? But I really feel that the more that you can take time for yourself and put it into your everyday life, the happier you're gonna be. And really that's the most important thing. And because the happier you are, the more you're gonna be there for your children, the more you're gonna be there for your family and friends, and the more you're gonna bring yourself to work and be happy and have a lot to give. So work-life balance is extremely important. It should be a priority, I think, for all of us. So I guess that's my opinion on that.
I love that. And I think, right, that idea of bringing yourself to work, that's staying with me, bringing your whole self to work. And I think for so many entrepreneurial women especially, that is often a motivating factor to leave a corporate workplace and to create your own business because you felt like you couldn't bring yourself to work, or maybe I'm just speaking about myself. Okay,
Can I
so
just say one more thing
go
about
for
that?
it,
As
please.
entrepreneurs, again, it's a badge of honor sometimes. I work all the time. I work, I can't take time off or 7 days a week. But I think we have to really shift that paradigm too.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, we'll have one more round. Do we have time for one more round?
One more, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. So just same question for everyone. Before we began the official program, we were chatting and I was speaking to Nero, or we were speaking about that idea of hustle. And I have 3 children, as I said earlier, and we're just very much in that hustle period, and especially with building this new business. And I have been very intentional, and sometimes my husband teases me, about bringing support systems into our home so that that hustle does not feel as stressful, so that it doesn't feel as strained, and so that I can truly enjoy my time with my patients and truly enjoy my time with my family. And so one of those systems in our home that I described to Neuro is to have a personal chef come. Life-changing, world-changing. So I'd love to know from you guys, what are some systems or support structures that you have either in your home life or in your work life that are helping you with wellness? And Suzanne,
You want me to start?
sure.
Okay, this is another one of those limiting beliefs things. We have to make it okay to get help and to invest in ourselves. So I'm constantly saying, should I be doing this? But cleaning lady, I don't want to walk around being constantly feeling bad about the fact that my house isn't clean. So I have to definitely hire a cleaning person. Dog walker, especially today, I'm thinking, oh, I need a dog walker. That's a new system I'm starting to put into place because I've been kind of relying on my kids. I always feel like having somebody that I can talk to about what I'm going through is really important, whether it's a coach or an energy healer that's going to help me to process my stuff. Those are the main things, like having somebody to help you process whatever is going on with you. That's kind of what I do.
So I actually want to piggyback on what you were speaking about earlier, bringing yourself to work. I call that, being intentional, really, is another way to frame that. And I've sort of coined that, I'm sure I'm not the first person to do so, but I've sort of coined that as one of, my saying. I'm like, it's about intentional nutrition and intentionally fueling yourself. And so if you're going to eat or consume, a milkshake or whatever that may be, make it intentional. Actually sit down, look at it, be proud of yourself for having that and enjoy the way it tastes versus slurping it down on your way to pick up kids. So being intentional about the little things that you do. And so for me, my commute, I actually live in Southington, so I'm learning a lot about Ridgefield and how close the community is. But so I live in Southington and my commute to work is an hour. So usually what I do is, and it can be longer sometimes depending on traffic, but usually what I do, and totally unrelated from food and nutrition, is I listen to a podcast. And yes, sometimes I listen to podcasts or webinars that are specifically about the things that I want to learn. So I've learned so much over the past year. I found a group that is a reliable source of information. I listened to a webinar. Now that doesn't totally disconnect me from the work that I'm doing when I get to RBNA Health, but it does, nobody's telling me what I need to listen to and what I need to learn about. And it's a moment where I can just, totally, it's creative in that aspect as well. On the other hand, I listen to True Crime Obsessed. Does anybody know Patrick and Jillian? Okay, no? All right. So totally separate, totally has nothing to do with what I do here. And it's just a moment to just disconnect. And then sort of circling back to food and nutrition about being intentional, is I really try my best, and I encourage clients to do so, be intentional, again, with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so sometimes that's going to look like making coffee, so getting up early. My fiance and I, we try, it's usually me getting him out of bed, he drives me crazy. Getting him out of bed, we try to do coffee in the morning, where we just wake up together at 6 o'clock, make fresh brewed coffee, and chat about who knows what. Sometimes Seinfeld is on the TV. And that feels really good. It feels like I'm not just living for that Friday night through Sunday morning. I'm living all 7 days of the week. But then again, sometimes that looks totally different. That looks like grabbing a coffee on the go and making it a little, something that's more of a treat. Because again, with food and mental health, I say that, and I'm happy to speak privately, or if anybody has any questions more about what the research says for mental health and what that sort of diet, again, I mean diet as a way of eating, not diet as a restrictive meal plan, so to speak, but what that diet looks like. But that's twofold. If you were to become obsessed with this diet for mental health, that completely defeats the purpose. So on the other hand, we know now, and it's on a lot of it on social media, about this intuitive eating approach, and that's the idea where we're really sort of drawing attention to the way that social media for so long has perpetuated diet culture, and people have had eating disorders or disordered eating behaviors as a result. And so I also encourage people to just be intentional when you're doing, quote, the things that are more so considered conventionally healthy for your physiological being, but also be intentional when you're not. Be intentional when you're eating a little bit more for your soul, or for whatever is just convenient at that time. So I hope that, if anything, this sort of gives you the space to just consider what you're eating and what you're enjoying, and making sure that, again, that it does have balance.
I absolutely, I am with Suzanne. I think to be okay and to say, I will be okay having a clean lady. My family is from Mexico, so we don't have a support system backing us. So to be okay if the house is like a mess, and be okay if nothing is perfect. But I will also add to see or to find that natural high of yours. And by natural high, I mean those activities that make your brain release dopamine. So it could be anything. It could be a walk. It could be a run with a pet in the garden. It could be listen to classical music. It could be drawing. It could be, every human being is different, and every human being has a different natural high. So just find yours, and you don't have to do it every day or all day. Maybe 30 minutes a day, maybe 50 minutes a day will be enough to recharge yourself. So that for me is a good system. For me especially, being outside with my puppy and to walk her around the neighborhood, it takes me 30 minutes, and then I return and I said, okay, I'm okay to go on.
Can I just talk about the guilt that people feel in not getting support? Because this is an issue I worked with women for years about, but I can do this myself, and I should, and I'll save money if I do it. And we kind of have to think about, what is the cost of doing it yourself? What are we really paying here? And that doesn't mean you hire everybody to do everything, but where would it have the most impact in your life if you invested in support? My husband pointed out to me that I needed another assistant for other areas of my work right now. And my thought was, oh, but I can do it. I can do this part. I should do it myself. That's the shoulding on yourself that I was talking about. And then I realized, the cost is not just paid by me. He said to me, you need it, but we actually all need it. We need you to do it. Because that freed up, mental space, my bandwidth to do it. So yes, absolutely. Those are questions and conversations that I think we all need to ask as women. where is that time that we can get back if someone else is doing something? Where would we invest that time? And if we look at it like that, who else benefits from it besides us? Because if we're more present and less tired, everybody benefits from that. Even though I think you should do it for yourself anyway. There's another should I gave you, right? That's maybe a good one. So there's that. I think there's more to that question, just in getting past the guilt. But for me, I needed the support of spending more time with my friends and being intentional about that. So I started to carve out half a day in my schedule, not consistently, but it was before this book came out, walking with a friend. And I'll tell you, I'm intentional about who those friends are too, because I have a lot of friends. I love them all, but some of them, if I walked with, it would end up being a therapy session for them, which I know is not supportive for me. I'll do it, but not during that time that I've carved out. So I have a short list of people I call. But we need that. We need that too. We need to not produce and perform all the time and do the things that nourish our souls, so that, I mean, all the other areas of our life benefit from that. But for me, that's what I needed. I just needed to continue to invest in those friendships at this stage of my life. So that was my support. Can I say one more thing?
Please.
I sadly am only here till about 1, so I'm happy to sign books. I'm selling them for less than Books on the Common, but they have them there to sign. And I have stuff over there that would be just a cute Mother's Day gift to the book, if you were interested. I didn't say that before. And I'm on social media, and I talk a lot about contentment and lowering stress in our life there too. So happy to connect there as well.
Thank you. Wasn't this a soul-filling panel, guys? Thank you so much. I think we're taking a little break now.
Let's take a 15-minute break, and then we're going to come back for one more talk before lunch. So this is great.
Great. Guys, that was awesome.
Thank you.
It was fun.
So many interesting things everybody said.
Yes.
My head is spinning.
That's great. Get some smart ones together. Yeah, I know. Yes. I think it's interesting. I notice how many people walk into it because we're all in that same space. Right?
Are you gonna go write about this?
I'm sure I will. At some point.
Because
Maybe
that
I'll
happened like 4 times this morning.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like so much more connected.
Well, that's true.
Right?
Right, it's relevant.
Yeah.
It's a relevant, like, this is what your
Totally.
people need to hear about. That's exactly.
Right?
Nira, you have Venmo or something,
I
right?
do. I have Venmo.
But like, I don't have that much cash. I never have that much cash. I use cash for free. I get cash every week and it pays me. I never have cash. Are you doing Venmo? Venmo, I do credit card. No, I'm just gonna make it large. I have more sizes too. I'm bringing it here. I have a lot more.
Oh, too much sitting, I need my seat.
I know, I feel like
It's got the magnetic energy technologies in it and tourmaline crystals.
wow.
So, when I'm at home sitting, I always have it, and I'm like, I can feel, I can feel that I need it.
The water, and then where I read that, it's kind of like, it should be more of a activity of Oh, I read about it, I was like, oh, so I really have to personally use this, like this, if you want this to work out, work out all the curves, like the toxins, we want to, like,
Your shoulders, okay, is your shoulders still bothering you?
Yes. So I slipped on ice in February
On a scale of 1 to 10?
right now. So I have frozen shoulders. I slipped on ice and I was diagnosed with frozen shoulders with muscular. Right now it doesn't hurt, but it's also like completely, not completely, but like stuck. Like I can do this one back here, this one won't work harder.
Okay, so are you open to trying something for it?
I'm not right now. My daughter's had a PCR test 20 minutes ago. That's why I was on my phone. Just one. So I'm trying to just like keep it.
All right, well, are you sitting right here?
I'm sitting.
Oh, okay.
I'm sitting right
All
there.
right, I didn't know if you were.
Okay.
No, that's fine, I
don't
can
feel
over
like
here,
spreading
I
out.
don't know if somebody's
Are
alive.
you here already?
I think I'm going to leave. I'm going to talk to Mary and see, like, if she wants me to leave because my daughter tested positive. I'm supposed to be on the panel at 1, and then I'm going to leave right after that.
Your daughter tested positive.
She just got a PCR like 20 minutes ago that was positive. I tested negative at home at 8:30.
One of my friends just tested positive.
It's like a different family. So like, we were worried about my middle daughter because she had a known exposure in her class yesterday. So we tested her last night and she was negative. We tested her and like all of us this morning. We all tested negative except the oldest had like the fuzzy, like that fuzzy line. It wasn't like a straight. So my husband took her to the doctor for PCR and it was positive. Oh gosh. And she wasn't even sure with the known exposure. None of us have.
Oh, I got terrible. I was terribly sick. For me, it was all neurological. Cardiovascular, maybe 3 months later, but it's all neuro. Like I felt. My husband caught it. He caught it in the most unlikeliest place, upstate New York. But then my boss was like, "Oh, I'm gonna try not to get it there, so that's why you need to get it there."
Oh, interesting.
So yeah. So anyway, I started having really bad headaches, just respiratory, like I couldn't breathe. I never officially got the cold when I was in a cough, but it was all during the neurological. No smell.
Oh, really?
I still can't smell. Then it's what? Like March?
So with COVID-19, was it, do you know what variant you had?
I don't know what the variant is. So I just, the whole thing for me was really complicated. So then after I had recovered, I got to work because I needed to leave to walk in the school. And then upstairs, it was like teeming like crazy. Oh wow. It's still, I mean, sometimes I wonder, I know the thought, did you know what that is?
No.
It's the hospital orthostatic hypotension. So it's tachycardia and tachycardia syndrome. So it's a lot.
Oh wow.
So you have to stay hydrated.
Yeah.
I've never had witnessed it before. So I went to our cardiologist, ultra monitor for 2 weeks, echocardiogram. So everything got fine, but he said you do have POTS because wearing that ultra monitor for such a long amount of time, I could tell when you're starting to get the arrhythmia for 8 hours at the end of the day. So coming home, I was maybe like getting no walk. I was starting So it was just, you know, I told my patients it could be bad post-COVID symptoms.
Right.
Sick at work. So gotta go rinse my
I need to go get her. So my husband, she stayed home this morning because she had a sore throat. And she had like a weird test, we couldn't tell what it was. So she stayed home. My husband went to get my preschooler. Okay.
It'll be fine.
My husband's missing a half a lung, so we've always been like crazy careful. And like last week was like the first week post spring break, so we made them wear their masks all week last week. And by Monday morning they were just like, and they were like, okay, fine. And they were just like, and it's up to you like there's a balance between like do this for everyone and like your body, your decision.
He's vaccinated.
He's vaccinated, which did,
I'm gonna be okay with that, you know?
I mean, it's scary. It's scary. Were you boosted when you got it?
No. But the booster got me really sick. Coming back to the COVID booster.
Oh, I think that was before the booster, right?
So I got sick in August, and then in January, I ended up with all the cardiac symptoms.
Oh, wow.
But towards Christmas, I couldn't go Christmas shopping. Because they're like, you're lying.
We have more easy out. Hey, take whatever.
But anyways, I finagled in Manhattan and I got home and I was like, I'm none of this. So I called the cardiologist, we did, and I worked my watch on my bike to see what it did. And so like my watch was happy and now so he's like, take it easy, stop working out so hard, take your vitamin D. Thank you.
Okay, yes. This is great to finally meet you. I know.
That's so interesting. I wanted to like comment on what
I know, it's so good. So here, you hold it? Okay, yeah, like hold it, like maybe go against something. Let's see how this goes. Yeah, that works.
Yeah, good.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm so glad you came down.
I'll send
That's
it to
so
your
great.
email.
Yeah, send it to your email, and that's
Okay.
so great that you
I'm so happy I'm
came.
here.
It's just
You
such
get
a
to
meet
meet
some
some
people, and yeah, it is a good group, and we're built, we're growing down here. And like I said, we want to be up in Hartford, and it's just like here. That's all. And I know somebody right now, but like I can't find anybody to lead it. So
Are you talking to Chanel about that?
I didn't talk to Chanel. That's one person I did not talk to. Yeah, like
I don't know
talked
if she'd want to be the leader or not.
Yeah, I've
I
talked
was
to
just
a
up at
few
Eat
people.
Women last night.
Yeah, I love
East
it.
In Hartford.
Yeah, she's so amazing. Yeah.
She was there, but
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've talked to a couple people that I have a couple people that, that are looking for me and the whole thing. So it will happen, but just not yet. I was just going to introduce you to Isabel. I don't know if you met
you know,
her.
I see Isabel on
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah, because she's the new Westport leader. So she's
okay.
trying to grow the Westport pod. And, the
Okay.
Ridgefield one, we're much more established over here. But she's doing that, so she's going to do great things with that. So we're going to have that. And then I think we have Hartford going, you know what I mean? So, yeah, because I want a connection up there. You have a few of you down here, but you know, once you really do things like this, we want to be more of these kind of things.
Yeah, this is fun.
Let
to
me
kind of
introduce
do a
you.
little bit.
So this is Suzanne. She's in Hartford. She's a member.
Well, I'm kind of like on the shore.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I
Oh,
get
that's right.
involved
You're a
with
little
all,
bit more
I'm more,
east.
I'm like near New
Yeah.
Haven, but
Yeah.
I'm involved with the Hartford chapter, just of different things. So,
Yeah.
because there's not like a
There's
New
not a
Haven.
big
There isn't a New Haven
She
chapter.
follows you on social.
I see you on social.
I said, oh, that's all I
should
remember,
do
too.
that.
I know.
It's catchy though, you know. You people,
I know.
you can get people's attention.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
definitely. That's why I said you're very
Really,
gifted at
like,
this.
they send me the DMs where it's like, thank you so much for saying that or whatever, and that's
Yeah.
what keeps me going every day.
Yeah.
I get the opposite too. I've gotten like bad letters sent to my house, and my husband's like, "This is
Really?
it. One more like,
Really?
like threatening letter."
You're
I'm like,
kidding
"Oh,
me.
yeah, I've gotten
Your stuff
letters."
is very,
That's terrible. You
positive.
put yourself
You're just
out
very
there.
positive. You're not very controversial.
No, I was somebody from Weston.
Yeah.
Like somebody
Yeah.
from Weston. Like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember which of all of them.
Yeah.
somebody from Weston, she's a nursing professor from Lincoln. She got very upset. It's egregious that you're throwing the nursing word out there. You're not even a nurse practitioner or whatever. She was just on the email. I'm sorry, on the letter. She sat down. Or had
You
to
have a
be, she.
doctorate in nursing.
Yeah, but she thinks it's made up.
Oh, I was gonna say, I was like, wait a minute.
But anyways, so those things you just have to let them go.
Yeah.
But the letter was
Yeah, it's scary, though.
double-sided.
That's
It was
scary.
6-point font, and it was single-spaced.
She's kind of a crazy.
Yeah, then that's,
Did you look her up?
Yeah.
There was
That's-
no
that's
return
just crazy.
address.
That's just crazy.
And
I'm not being rude, but I want to get us started here
Yeah,
because time is
okay.
such a
That was
commodity.
wow.
So let me go. David,
She's like,
So
I'm
what
going
is
to.
your,
My
what do you
title.
do?
So I'm a doctor of nursing practice. I'm a women's health nurse practitioner. And I chose that a very long time ago when I was thinking about what am I going to do for the rest of my life. So I went into nursing in hopes of understanding what are the systems that are broken in the United States of America. This was in 2003 that I graduated because things were already bad. I'm originally from the Southwest. So I was wondering why women are so sick, right? Back then.
We don't take care of ourselves.
Well,
For
nobody
one.
cares about us.
Yeah, there's not a lot of focus.
Right, that's the problem. It's been the problem since 1998. So it wasn't until 1998 that the United States was like, oh, like the NICHD, the NIH, they were like, oh, that's right.
Women's
It's like,
health.
oh, the studies have been all pointed towards men, and that's why the big emphasis was towards men's heart attacks and men's risks of heart disease.
Oh, yeah, they kind of switched, I know, with women and cardiac health.
So cardiac health
became a big thing.
It's a very big thing because the numbers are astounding. That's what I'm going to talk about, is how women are dropping like flies and how we really don't
Just
know
not
enough.
diagnosed.
We don't talk about it enough. It's dismissed. But think about all the things that everybody's doing here. And you have the hormones, the excess stressors, the genetics that don't complement us.
Yeah.
But with that said, you can change it, right? So just because you have a family history of breast cancer, it doesn't mean that you're going to go down that track.
Right.
Because there's such thing as epigenetics.
Yeah.
And I'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And then the idea is to reduce the risk of oxidative stress.
Right.
The buzzword right now is inflammation, but if you go in a little bit deeper, it's oxidative stress. So as a nurse practitioner, I don't have a lot of resources, right? My patients don't have resources. So I've had to figure out the systems that I have to allocate to take care of women. Because that's what Believe.com is.
You have a card. Let me just grab one so that I can just, connect that. I have so many clients. That's what happened to you. That's a bummer. My whole friend's family got sick. This is really important. Look, you have to have the whole family have health. Without it.
jacket.
I told you my.
Yeah, it's hard. You don't know
Jacket. I'm gonna get rid of it too. Yeah.
For me, everybody. Yeah, I actually like it more. Do you? I do too. I love leather.
So that's my favorite. Okay, yeah, that's good. All right, so this is like. This is like the hard part. But the good part is you on the microphone. So that is great. Okay, everybody. Yeah. It is on. No, people can hear me. Yeah.
It really does have to be closer to.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Okay.
It's excellent.
They're gorgeous. I mean, I go.
Yeah, no.
I'm so glad.
I wanted to go this way. Oh, did he turn the tape off?
I hope so.
Did
Yeah.
Did you guys turn the
That's off right now.
recording
Yeah,
off?
that's off. Oh, it's on?
So it's been running the
Oh,
whole
it's on?
time?
But they're gonna cut it, they'll cut it.
Okay, yeah, you can cut the parts. Yeah.
But you're live.
Okay, all right, okay, yeah, okay, good to know. Good to know. Yeah.
C'est la vie. Okay, everyone, I promise the exhibitors will still be here at the end. We just want to carry on before we have a longer break for lunch.
Yeah.
So as soon as you can, please come and take a seat so we can carry on.
I think that's just right, Christine.
Until I saw
Let's
when I look at my
go.
Facebook friends at the mall. And then I just started seeing what she did. I was like,
Nicole,
I need to
would I
know
introduce Isabel? Just take a You don't have to even really move, you can, but you don't have to, it's like, just sort of casual. Okay, all right, everybody, okay, and, we're gonna have, we have one more talk and then we'll have lunch, so we'll have plenty of time to talk and, you know, exchange information and everything, so this has been incredible so far, everybody, and the next speaker, is Isabel Bogdan, and I am so thrilled to have her here. She has a doctorate in nursing. She has her own medical platform, it's called Believe, and she is affiliated with Columbia University. I know you do some teaching over there, and you work with a practice, and it's all affiliated and so forth. But the other thing that I'm so excited about is Isabel agreed to lead the Westport Pod for Big. So she is gonna grow that area, so we have a lot of more connections and more women to empower and to bring programs to, so we're so excited about that. So without further ado, I'm gonna let Isabel take the stage. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Mary. It's been such a journey, everybody.
Thank you.
So I'll give you a little background about myself. I'm not from Connecticut, nor from the East Coast.
I feel like the mic isn't working, like it was much louder before.
Hello, hello? It's on?
Yeah, maybe you just have to be
A little bit closer?
Yeah.
All right.
I see them do this on TV. Like, wait, Lefty Lucy? Or so funny.
All right, you got to bend. I will bring it up. I'm not used to speaking with a microphone, but I think I might get one soon. All right. All right, so number one, I was trying to tell you all that I'm originally from the Southwest. So I met my husband in Grand Central through manifesting, a good husband, and 2 weeks later we were married. So this happened in 2007, and it's been a fabulous journey, all to say that I've been going to where I'm supposed to be all along. I'm originally from El Paso, Texas. El Paso, Texas is a border town. It's a very sick town. It's ground zero for diabetes, hypertension, strokes, anything you'd like to find out about how women die, you can visit my hometown. So this was the reason why I decided that nursing would be my profession. So I had options. There's a medical school in my town. There was different modalities for health and wellness. And right across the border is Mexico. So many people would say to me, just go across the street, basically spit in Mexico, get your medical degree, and then come back home. But I said, no, women need me. For some weird reason, I ended up getting my women's health nurse practitioner degree. I got my bachelor's and my master's from the University of Texas in El Paso, and ended up coming up to New York City, and I finished off my doctorate at Columbia. So, connecting the dots, the illness throughout women's lifespan continues in New York City. So I thought, here I am, I'm coming from the Southwest, and I interviewed against many, many different women from Johns Hopkins, Yale, but they didn't have the experience of preeclampsia and heart disease and all the other metabolic disease that afflicts women. So for me, it was such a gift to be invited to Columbia to teach and bring of my knowledge from the Southwest. Sadly, we're here in 2022 and nothing has changed. I sat back in 2019. In 2017, the worst statistic was brought to my visibility. It was a statistic that close to 300,000 women died in 1 year, and it really bothered me. In 2020, almost 500,000 women died. And now that we have COVID compounding cardiac health, it really touches home. So I said, I have to do something about it. I have to create a call of action. I have to understand what makes women sick. And this is why I created Believe.co. Believe.co is everything put together that I would have Nero and Kate and Brittany and everybody who is in this room, because we all have the common denominator of wellness, mind, body, and soul. So my idea is to digitalize women's health and create it so that women of throughout all kinds of spectrums, financial differences, socioeconomic differences, can have access to the same boutique healthcare that we all want access to, right? So this is the idea. And so I've been exploring many different venues to bring to women access
easy access, so where you can just go to your cell phone and find out who you can talk to, right, about your past medical history. We know that a lot of science is advancing. There's such thing as epigenetics. Now we're understanding inflammation. Now we're understanding oxidative stress. So as long as we understand that there's more to women's health than just your regular pap smear and breast exam, we can really target premature aging and cardiac disease. All right, so I'm sorry I'm sounding like a pitch here, because I get so passionate. So let me just track back. My father was an orphan. He was the son of 10 other children. And my grandmother passed away at the age of 37 from a cardiomyopathy. And she left all these children orphans. So being invited to participate and work and fund Columbia's maternal fetal medicine with my knowledge has been a gift for me. So that's why I keep commuting back into the city, because I work in the perinatal department. And so women there come from so many different backgrounds with the risk of cardiac disease. So why do I say the risk of cardiac disease? Women in their pregnancy are in the most highest risk in their life for developing cardiac disease. If at pregnancy you develop gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, poorly controlled hypertension that hasn't been diagnosed, you will develop antibodies that will take you into the subsequent pregnancy if you do have another pregnancy, and it'll be even more higher risk, right? So then by the time you're 60 years old, these antibodies continue to produce inflammation and produce oxidative stress in your body, which increases the risk of cardiac disease and premature aging. So why is it such an important target for me? Well, because since 1998, the idea of women's health has been very quiet until the NIH realized that there hasn't been enough data on women's health. And I feel really jaded about that. I'm like, here I am, 42 years old, and the data is skewed. Up until now, I've always thought, men are at higher risk of cardiac disease. Men are gonna have heart attacks. Men are gonna have strokes. Let's take care, and nothing against men, because I love the XY chromosome. But I'm saying that we also need to focus more on what helps women reduce their risk. And when do we reduce our risk? So sitting back and interviewing so many patients and taking care of so many women throughout the lifespan, I realized that the risk is decreased at around age 8. If we don't start talking to young girls about their cardiometabolic health, it's going to start to get blurry. So, and I need your help with this, right? So I don't want this conversation to be about aesthetics. I don't want the conversation to be about low self-esteem or diet restriction. I need the conversation to be expansive about how do we get girls to become active, and how do we excite them about this morning meditation, this morning movement, to help promote and move the metabolism in our body, right? So I'm also a yogi. I do yoga, and I have my RYT, so I am an official yoga instructor. And then I understand the chakras, right? So our energy flows from the top to the bottom, and that's why it's so important for me to get the conversation out about movement for young girls in a very kind and loving way. So I'm thinking about yoga, I'm thinking about, Mary was with me. I brought in Laura Sabia, and we spoke about creating a program for young girls to help reduce the risk of PCOS and have the conversations about PCOS, because PCOS is inflammatory as well, but it's looked at as like, obesity or hirsutism, or something's wrong with your ovaries. It's a hormonal imbalance, but for me, the word obesity doesn't even exist. For me, it's inflammation, and it's water retention, and it's a hormone imbalance. So I'd like to also eradicate the word obesity from our vocabulary. I hate the word fat. I hate the word morbid. Like, those are just all bad words. What it has to deal with is inflammation. And so if we don't put these concepts into check, the world of women's health will continue to be blurry, because it continues to be a world of aesthetics and definitions that have been put into place since the 1950s.
So I'm all about modern women's health. You'll see my website. I have health, beauty, wellness, and longevity as part of my pillars. And for me, it's about having the conversation that's individual to each one of you. When I talk to you, or when I talk to you, your triggers and your stressors can be something from this morning, or it could be something from your past. Intergenerational trauma is very real. So it's also important to expand the conversation about who we are, where we're going, where do we come from. Because my thoughts and my past are so much more different than yours. Because I grew up on the border, I saw poverty. I saw women crying for water because they were so thirsty. And that was my reality, and it touched my soul in a different way, and it scarred me in a certain way that you've probably been scarred in a different way. So there is so much healing that has to happen, right? So this is where conversation where Neuro would come into play in my idea of Believe.co. So, you know, when I'm speaking about women's cardiac health, it's about mind, body, soul. It's about reducing those external factors, those external triggers, and helping the internal part heal those thoughts, right? So I teach yoga, and at 2 p.m., I have a room full of people who are willing to come in and be instructed by me. Whereas when I go to work in the mornings, I have a lot of no-shows where women are not coming in to see the doctor, right? So it's another idea, where is that health, wellness mentality, and where are we missing the targets, right? Because you guys are here actively listening, but it's like I'm preaching to the choir. So what my vision is for Believe.co is to take it out to the public and to make it full-fledged access so that women view their bodies as their temple and recreate themselves from the inside out, with abolishing the guilt, abolishing that past generational trauma, and coming from a place of forgiveness. Because we don't choose our existence, we don't choose where we come from. So Neuro, you were speaking about very amazing spiritual connections that as women we have to continue to listen to, and they get muffled with the daily activity of the hustle, right? So it's so important to stop, meditate, and create a daily regimen of how you can create the stop so that you can regroup for your own self. I'm so sorry, I didn't get your name, but
That's okay. My name's Monica.
Monica, you're talking about nutrition. So on Wednesdays, yesterday was my diabetes day, and it's so sad that women that are, you know, within the childbearing years are so sick. They have hemoglobin A1Cs, and that's an oxidative factor, right? So I'm not sure if everybody knows what a hemoglobin A1C is, but a normal range is anything less than 5.9 that's not considered diabetes. Anything above that is considered diabetes. So to fully understand what that number means and how we can help women undo the risk, it has to do with nutrition, right? And it's not diet and exercise that has to be punitive. It should be seen as a working modality, as a loving therapy of an everyday self-care routine, and not punitive. So this is another reason why I reached out to Laura Sabia and a lot of the fitness experts out in Fairfield County, is because I'm exploring ways that women are opening up their heart center. So I despise the treadmill. I need to work out. I need to open up my heart. I hate ellipticals, I hate machines, I hate gyms, because I feel that they're dirty places, right? That's me, might not be you. But maybe I can cater and customize a workout for you. And so there's so much to come from Believe.co. There's different workouts for different women. I'm sure all of us could go around the room and say, I like this, I love HIIT, I like boot camp, or whatever expands your heart. So these are really important topics to discuss to help women keep a day-to-day reality of how they're going to maintain that self-care routine. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't understand why we're not having the conversation on a daily basis, and I don't understand why we visit our doctor's office and all we leave with is a pap smear and a breast exam, if you're lucky. And now we're being told that we don't even need that anymore. So I said, I need to just do something else about this. I want to create
a platform where women can come and we can all have an open conversation about what makes us feel better. Because when we feel better, we look better, right? And this is where the beauty component comes in. And now you have every other place that's offering aesthetics. And this is a very good way to capture a client and say, hey, have you thought about your cardiac health? Right? So I come from a place of love because my grandmother left 10 children orphans, of which impacted me because my father probably didn't have the parenting skills that he needed. Not growing up with a mother, didn't have a concept of what a woman did. And so I always had to stand back and say, you know what, my dad didn't have a mom. And so I had to make excuses for that. And I'm sure there's other women out in America that have the same idea. But if we don't break that intergenerational trauma here in the United States today, it's going to continue to perpetuate. And many more of us are going to continue to either live with it and not be fully functional, or some of us bring it into healing and we continue to discuss the message, right? So I can't control my genetics, but I can control the epigenetics, right? And this is where yoga comes in, and this is where exercise comes in, and this is why it's so important to understand the external factors of how we can change our DNA. So again, genetics. Genetics are something that we're born with. It's the code. It's the proteins that discern that if you get too stressed, it'll break down, you develop breast cancer, or you develop schizophrenia or depression because you're predisposed, and you carry that cross, for some of us. You carry that heritage of whatever your family makeup is, right? So my dad had this or my mom had that, fine, but you can fix it. Even at the age of 65, within 8 weeks, studies have shown that if you put it into play, certain routines and regimens, you can fix the genetics, you can heal your DNA by the use of opening your heart and sweating and finding joy and gratitude, just like Neuro was talking about. So joy and gratitude and staying in your happy and speaking gently to yourself is very, very soothing. And it's going to help recover that sheath in your DNA. So we're moving into a direction where modern women's health is just extremely valuable. And this conversation is even more important if we continue to replay it on the social media networks. So I spoke about epigenetics, and I spoke about oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is when you have a fish in a fish tank that's not thriving. Right? You guys ever remember that? The little fish that starts to get sad? That's oxidative stress. So when you're starting to feel stressed, you're starting to feel murky, that's what's happening to you. You're starting to turn into that fish. So we need to get you out of that water, whatever your environment is, and get you into something more balanced, your pH balance, and try to heal your scales, so to speak, and get you out of that very, I would say, deoxygenated environment, right? So that's why breathing is so important. And for me, I love yoga, but not all yoga is healing, right? You walk into the room, you might feel a little stressed because it's a little competitive, or the entire room is wearing Lululemon and you're not, you're wearing your Gap gear, which again, you have to figure out how to feel like you're good enough. And it comes with building confidence. And again, we bring back to the age of 8 and how to build young girls' confidence. And I had to stand in front of the mirror. I was an obese child, right? So I was not an obese child. I was an inflamed child. Okay, so I had water retention from having asthma, from living close to the freeway, right? So I didn't live in like the most pristine neighborhood down in Texas. And it all made sense one day. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was chronically stressed. I learned how to speak English when I was 8 years old. The environment was just very toxic for me. And that's why I was like, and plus I was probably not eating the right things. So I was not as active as a child. So I put all of that into my own story. And so now it's my turn to bring it out to the public. And so I speak from a place of experience, and I speak from a place of love. And what I do know is that what's brought me to this place
is my own inner confidence. And the voice in my head that says, yes, you can. But in Spanish, it's a little bit more violent than that, right? in my Mexican family, we use words like, you know, si se puede, right? So we have very strong words that replay in my head. No te rajes, like we say really strong verbiage in the back of our head. So those other voices, which is really important to listen to, what are your kind and loving voices? Because we all have different voices. You have the voices in the back of your head that tell you to wake up or to take care, or when somebody comes to you for something, you know, maybe you know, your empathy voices. So I recommend that we all look back and start listening to the voices that play into our head. They probably will be your mom or your grandma or some special person whose voice is back there. And for me, it's my mother and my spiritual mother, my godmother. So, and I'm trying to just narrow it down now to the last part of our tummy. So gut health. Everybody has heard about gut health and the microbiome. So as much as the epigenetics, the surrounding, the external factors impact us, as does what's inside of us. So when you're feeling imbalanced, it can also be because the bacteria that makes you can be overwhelmed, right? So sometimes we feel nauseous or we feel, have you ever heard that term? I felt it in my gut, right? So it also has to do with what is happening in your belly. So as much as I want to say you have a lot to do with who you are, your inner bacteria, the little creatures in your belly, have even more to do with how you feel. So this is why it's so important to have a conversation about nutrition. And so how I break it down to my patients so it doesn't become a cultural attack is that I ask them to compare themselves to a beautiful vehicle. And it's funny what everybody will say, right? So I feel sometimes like a Tesla or a Mercedes, you know, 550, right? So I want to ask my patients, what vehicle are you? And then they'll say, oh, well, you know, I'm a Corolla or I'm a Camry. I'm like, really? Okay, and fine, right? But anyways, I say, and why not a Mercedes-Benz? Why not? Why not a BMW? So, and they're like, so I try to work with the mindset of who they are. And then then I take them onto Google and we start comparing vehicles. And then I said, you are better than any of that because that's replaceable, but you're not. So let's talk about nutrition. Let's talk about gasoline, diesel, and electricity. And let's talk about how we're supplementing our bodies with not the right type of energy. And that's how I feel that the conversation should always play in with patients so that they don't feel that there's an attack to their day-to-day. I compare them to the most excellent material object that they could possibly desire and how well they're going to treat that material object. But let them realize that they are better than that and that they should treat themselves better than what they would treat that material object because they are that less replaceable. They are priceless. You are priceless. And so this is why I came up with my name, Believe.co. Because if you don't believe in who you are, if you don't believe in the you, in the essence of you, you can't make those necessary changes. So it all boils back to neuro and mindset and firming up that belief of the essence of who we are so that we can heal from the inside out. And I know that everybody's hungry, but that's my talk on Believe.co. And I open up the stage to know if anybody wants to ask me any questions. Sure.
I do have a question. So I really, thank you for sharing your idea and your program. I definitely want to learn more about it. I feel like we share very similar philosophies in our work, and I completely agree in focusing on the longevity and quality of life. But where I find difficult sometimes working with patients, specifically young women, is to getting them to believe that what they do now will set them up for success. And again, I always go back to this term quality of life. for the rest of their life. And they are so much more focused on aesthetics, likes on social media, popularity, that material item. And how do you recommend framing that conversation to get them interested in their long-term health and quality of life in a way that doesn't touch on the moments of the now?
That's a very good question. And that's why I brought on the aesthetics component in my practice. And I'm not going to dismiss anybody who does have liposuction or the Brazilian butt lifts and all that great stuff. I think they're great therapies for the acute need. I think that you have to also assess the mental health of the patient, because that quick fix, that urge could be very impulsive. So I will say to you, when I was 18, 20 years old, I went to a plastic surgeon because I wanted to get breast implants. And what he did for me was amazing. He recommended me to go see a therapist first to understand why I wanted the breast implants.
Is that here?
Nope, that was in Texas. So I kept bothering him, I kept knocking on. He was like the best plastic surgeon. I'm like, hey, and it was Dr. Weeks, and I went to him for everything. Like, I wanted it all. And he sat there, and he's very amazing, number one. But he assessed me. He says, where does this desire come from? Is it to please someone else? Is it because sometimes that validation is not just for you? It comes from a place where you seek that because you want it from someone else. So it's really important to understand the client and have them do a journal. So when I start with my patients, I have the 6, the 12, and the 24-week program. And I have them start a journal. And the journal is talking about what they were 30 days ago and how they felt 30 days ago, if they can remember 30 days ago. And to just ask a lot of reflective questions. And what happens is that the patient will answer those questions themselves throughout the journal, where you don't have to really tell them that they're right or wrong. It's focusing on that, why is it that you need that change now, right? So we can talk about the breast implants, we can talk about the different kinds of therapies that are out there, like the mesotherapy, the nails, right? The hair, the extensions, all the different things that women feel that they're not good enough because they're not good enough or they're lacking, that they need to replace. But where does that come from? And is she willing to wait to make the necessary changes? Because like you said, a lot of those now therapies come with side effects. They're not the most suitable modalities, right? So we want to encourage the cardiac movement. And we want to help to modify whatever their needs are, that those aesthetic desires are right then and there. But if maybe M-Sculpt would be an option, right? I think M-Sculpt is a very benign therapy. And there are such things as lasers. So I'm a big laser proponent because you're not injecting anything into the body, and you can definitely change different things like lifting up cheekbones. It's not going to be immediate. You're going to have to come back for 6 or so many sessions. But do you see how I am speaking the language of aesthetics, yet I'm not like, oh, you need cheek implants, or so let's try these modalities first, and then we can maybe discuss this, these implants, because these have risks, right? So we do know that breast implants can increase the risk of breast cancer and autoimmune disease. So those are real topics, and that's a real conversation to have with your client. And if your doctor has not talked to you about those risks, and they're failing to talk to you about the risks, the benefits, and the alternatives, now the client has the option to move forward with that. So I congratulate her, and I tell her I'm still here, and I'm going to take care of you throughout the lifespan. It's a hard call, but you really want to assess where they're coming from first.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have one.
Sure.
So I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying needs to get to the younger people
Yes.
sooner. So are you aware of any sort of educational push in this direction, or what? I think almost everyone is moms in here. I'm going to go on a limb, I think, and or maybe grandmoms or even aunties. Someone in our life is going to come next, and how? Is it already there? What should we be doing to help this movement go along? Like everything you said, I was thinking, God, why didn't they tell my daughter this when she was in 5th grade or 3rd grade? And I just kept thinking about how this could have affected affected and impacted her entire life had someone else besides the voice of mom, as they don't want to hear from us. But if, you know, beautiful gym teacher says la la la, then they'll listen. So like, I don't know, what do you?
Some of those conversations are being had at school, but we have to be careful because if the conversation is somehow translated into something else, like my teacher said that you're not buying me healthy food, mom, right? So then it becomes a problem with the school system. So there's a certain generalization or a generalized way of saying things where we can't cater it particularly to a population. So we can't talk about PCOS in schools, right? Because then it becomes a clinical diagnosis and then you run into muddy waters. Can it be part of the health conversation? It has to be a very broad discussion because I know my daughter has it, and she's very well versed with like celiac disease and, you know, Crohn's and inflammatory disorders. So they do know some, but social media is doing a fantastic job of being out there and talking to girls about PCOS and menstruation. But for me, it's more about body positivity and understanding that I can't look like Taylor Swift. Like I will never look like Taylor Swift. You know, like I'm gonna kill my hair. I'm gonna like, you know, like I just won't look like Taylor Swift. And I have to be okay with my version of me. And so and this is the reason why I don't color my hair. And if you do, I'm not saying that, you know, you're bad. But this is why I try to embody who I am as much as I can because I want to speak to younger girls about how to modify their risk factors and how they're not stuck in a place of their own disbeliefs, right? Because we all come, like I said, with our own intergenerational trauma, with our baggage from our parents. We tend to bring it to our kids. So there's a lot of healing that has to happen. And this is why preventing aging, and I think that's also one of the questions that you're having, is that if we start to prevent inflammation at a younger age, we'll start to prevent premature aging. And this is where the topic of staying sexy without having to sexualize it is really important. Up until like 80, like, you know, you can have a broad spectrum of what is sexy to you. And the definition of sexy to you is you. And that's what my program is about. It's about broadening that conversation that your definition is what matters, not my definition.
That was we have other questions we can do because we're going to have lunch now. And let's go till 20 till so we have enough time for everybody to sign books and look at things and talk to each other. And I see collaborations forming here. I see it so clearly because that's what we do. Let's do that and come back at 20 till. And we have 3 kinds of wraps, just so you know. There's chicken, vegetable, and Caesar. And then there's a side salad for everyone. And there's iced tea or water or coffee. So there's a few choices up there for you. So enjoy it.